The desert wind brought the scent of trouble before it reached Durango Creek, but Zara Thompson had arrived anyway, her burgundy dress billowing around her ankles as she stepped off the stagecoach. It was 1878, and the small mining town in Arizona Territory wasn't accustomed to unmarried women traveling alone, especially not ones who carried themselves with such unflinching confidence. "Another one of those fancy women," muttered a gray, bearded man leaning against the general store. "Coming to set up shop, I reckon." Zara pretended not to hear as the driver handed down her trunk. At 25, she'd grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her. The daughter of a Boston physician, she'd trained alongside her father until his death left her with skills but no practice. No respectable hospital would hire a female doctor, so she'd gone west where need often outweighed prejudice. "Miss, you sure you got the right town?" The stagecoach driver scratched his head. "Durango Creek ain't exactly welcoming to, well, ladies traveling alone." "I'm exactly where I need to be," Zara replied, scanning the dusty Main Street. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house?" Before the driver could answer, the pounding of hooves drew everyone's attention. A group of riders thundered into town, their horses lathered, and one man slumped in his saddle, blood staining his shirt. "Doc Simmons," one of the riders shouted. "Where's the doc?" An older man emerged from the saloon, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Doc's been gone 3 days, rode out to the Patterson place. What happened?" "Dylan got himself shot breaking up a fight at the Broken Spoke Ranch. He's losing blood fast." Zara dropped her handbag and moved forward. "Get him down, I can help." The men turned to stare at her, expressions ranging from confusion to outright derision. "Madam, no offense, but we need a doctor, not a—" The speaker stopped, apparently unable to decide what exactly she was. "I am a doctor," Zara stated firmly, already rolling up her sleeves. "And that man will die while you stand there questioning my credentials." The injured man, now barely conscious, groaned as blood seeped through his fingers pressed against his side. "Let her be," came a deep voice from the back of the crowd. The sea of dusty cowboys parted to reveal a tall figure, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Dakota Irwin, foreman of the Broken Spoke, was not a man people argued with. His reputation as the fastest draw in the territory was matched only by his fairness. "Get him to the doc's office," Dakota ordered, dismounting in one fluid motion. His blue eyes assessed Zara coolly. "Can you really help him?" "Yes, if we hurry," she replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. Dakota nodded once. "Then do it." The injured cowboy was carried to the small doctor's office at the end of the street. Zara followed, aware of the whispers that trailed behind her. "They say she's one of them women from back east trying to be men. No lady would wear a dress that fits so particular." "She's no lady, that's for certain." Dakota turned sharply toward the muttering men. "She's helping Dylan when none of you can. That's enough talk." Inside the doctor's office, Zara worked swiftly, cutting away the bloody shirt and examining the wound. The bullet had entered the man's side but hadn't exited. "I need hot water, clean cloths, and whatever alcohol is available," she instructed. "And I'll need someone with steady hands to assist me." To her surprise, Dakota rolled up his sleeves. "Tell me what to do." For the next hour, Zara worked methodically, extracting the bullet, cleaning the wound, and stitching it closed while Dakota followed her instructions without question. His hands, though calloused from rope and reins, were surprisingly gentle as he handed her instruments and held the lantern steady. When she finally straightened, wiping sweat from her brow, the injured man was sleeping, his breathing steady. "He'll live," she said simply. "He needs rest and clean bandages twice daily." Dakota studied her face. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My father was Dr. Jonathan Thompson of Boston. I assisted him for 15 years before his death." Zara began cleaning the instruments. "Though most people prefer to imagine I learned my skills in some less respectable manner." A slight smile crossed Dakota's face. "Most people are fools." Outside, the crowd had grown, curious faces peering through the windows. "Dylan's resting," Dakota announced as they emerged. "The lady doctor saved him." "Lady doctor," scoffed the saloon keeper. "There's no such thing, probably just a nurse getting above her station." "Or worse," added a woman in a prim bonnet. No decent woman would handle a man's body like that. Zara's chin lifted, but before she could speak, Dakota stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his holstered revolver. They said she was no lady, he drawled, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent street. But I say she's my lady, that's enough. Zara's eyes widened at his words. They'd just met. What game was this cowboy playing, your lady? She questioned softly. Dakota turned to her, tipping his hat with a slight smile. My town's doctor, at least. We've been without one since old Doc Simmons started drinking more than doctoring. He addressed the crowd again. Anyone who's got a problem with Dr. Thompson can take it up with me. The crowd dispersed quickly, nobody willing to challenge Dakota Irwin. Only Mrs. Holloway, a plump woman in her 50s, approached them. I've got your room ready, doctor, and don't you mind them, she said kindly. They'll come around when their children get fever or their men get shot. That night, alone in her small room at the boarding house, Zara unpacked her medical bag and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Dakota Irwin's unexpected support had silenced the town's immediate objections, but she knew the battle was far from over. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Thompson? Dakota's voice was low. May I have a word? She opened the door cautiously. He stood in the hallway, hat in hand, his dark hair falling over his forehead. I wanted to thank you properly for saving Dylan, he said. And to apologize for speaking out of turn earlier. You mean when you claimed me as your lady? Zara raised an eyebrow. A slight flush colored his tanned cheeks. It seemed the quickest way to shut them up. This town respects two things: guns and property. Since I didn't want to shoot anyone, I went with the other option. Despite herself, Zara laughed. Well, I appreciate the intent, Mr. Irwin, misguided as it was, but I've been dealing with people's disapproval for years now. Dakota, he corrected. And I've no doubt you can fight your own battles, Doctor, but you'll find frontier towns have their own ways. Sometimes it helps to have an ally who knows the territory. He hesitated, then added, the Broken Spoke could use a doctor on retainer. 20 cowboys, frequent injuries, we'd pay well. Zara considered him. Are you offering me work or protection, Mr. Irwin? Dakota, he repeated. And I'm offering both. This town needs a doctor, but they won't take to a woman easily. The ranch's backing would help establish you. And what would you expect in return? She asked carefully. His blue eyes held her steadily. Just doctoring, madam. Whatever else folks might think, I know what a lady is. After he left, Zara stood by the window, watching as he mounted his horse and rode into the darkness. Dakota Irwin was not what she'd expected to find in Durango Creek. A cowboy with honor was as rare as a woman doctor. She had come west for a fresh start, for a place where skill might matter more than gender. Perhaps this dusty town could become home after all. The following days brought a steady stream of patients to Zara's door. Word had spread about her saving Dylan's life, and curiosity overcame prejudice at least enough for people to seek her help for minor ailments. Most were surprised by her professionalism and knowledge, though few would admit it openly. Dakota kept his distance but remained a silent supporter. Whenever someone spoke against the lady doctor, they'd find the foreman of the Broken Spoke suddenly at their side, his presence a wordless warning. A week after her arrival, Zara was summoned to the home of Mayor Thornton, whose wife was experiencing a difficult pregnancy. She found the woman pale and weak, clearly having suffered for days. My husband didn't want to call you, Mrs. Thornton whispered. Said no female doctor could know about childbirth if she wasn't married. Your husband was wrong, Zara said gently, examining the woman. I've delivered dozens of babies, and right now yours needs help. For hours, Zara worked to turn the breech baby, coaching Mrs. Thornton through waves of pain. When the mayor returned home and found Zara there, his face darkened with anger. Get that woman out of my house, he thundered. I sent for Doc Simmons. Doc Simmons is passed out at the saloon, Zara replied calmly, not looking up from her patient. And if I leave now, you'll lose both your wife and child. The mayor paled, torn between his prejudice and fear. Thomas, his wife pleaded, let her stay. The baby's coming. Shortly before dawn, a healthy baby boy was born, as Zara placed the swaddled infant in Mrs. Thornton's arms. She caught the mayor watching her with grudging respect. Thank you, he said stiffly. Your fee can wait until morning, Zara finished, packing her bag. Right now, your family needs rest. As she stepped outside into the cool pre-dawn air, she found Dakota leaning against a post, holding the reins of her borrowed horse. Word travels fast, he explained, seeing her surprised expression. Thought you might need a ride back when you finished. You've been waiting all night. He shrugged, seemed the gentlemanly thing to do. They rode side by side through the silent town, the first light of dawn turning the desert landscape gold and rose. The mayor's son, Dakota said finally, that'll change things. Perhaps, Zara agreed. Though I've found that people's minds change slowly, if at all. Dakota glanced at her profile, admiring the determination in her jawline. What made you come west? You could have stayed in Boston, married a banker, had an easier life. Zara's laugh held no humor. No one wanted to marry a woman who knew more about anatomy than embroidery, and after my father died, his colleagues made it clear a female physician wasn't welcome. She looked at him directly. I came west because I thought people here cared more about results than rules. Some do, Dakota said quietly. Some of us had to learn that lesson the hard way. Before she could ask what he meant, they arrived at the boarding house. Dakota dismounted and offered his hand to help her down. Exhausted from the night's work, Zara accepted, feeling the strength in his calloused palm. Thank you, she said, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Dakota tipped his hat, a small smile playing at his lips. Get some rest, doctor. This town's finally starting to realize what they have in you. As summer settled over Durango Creek, Zara's practice grew slowly but steadily. She set broken bones, delivered babies, treated fevers, and slowly earned the respect, if not always the approval, of the townspeople. Dakota continued to bring his injured ranch hands to her, and their professional relationship developed into a cautious friendship. One evening, as Zara was closing her office, Dakota arrived with a young Mexican boy cradled in his arms. Found him collapsed by the creek, Dakota explained, laying the child gently on the examination table. He's burning up. Zara examined the boy, noting the rash on his chest and his labored breathing. Scarlet fever, I think. Where are his parents? Don't know. Might be from one of the migrant worker families. Dakota watched as Zara bathed the boy's face with cool water. Will he be all right? I hope so, if we can break the fever. Zara prepared a tincture and carefully spooned it between the boy's cracked lips. He'll need constant care for the next few days. Dakota nodded. I'll send word to the ranches, see if anyone's missing a child. For 3 days and nights, Zara barely left the boy's side. Dakota visited each evening, bringing food that she barely touched and news that no one had claimed the child. On the 4th night, when the fever finally broke, Zara fell asleep in the chair beside the examination table. She woke to find a blanket draped over her and Dakota sitting across the room, watching her with those steady blue eyes. The boy, she asked immediately, sleeping peacefully, Dakota assured her. You saved him, Doc, Zara stretched, wincing at her stiff muscles. What are you still doing here? It must be past midnight. Just making sure you both were all right. He hesitated, then added, and I found out who he is. His name is Miguel. His mother died of the same fever 2 weeks ago. Father works at the Silver Creek mine. Poor child, Zara murmured. He was probably wandering, looking for help. His father's on his way, should be here by morning. Dakota stood, offering her a cup of coffee. You should get some rest yourself. You look exhausted. Zara accepted the coffee gratefully. I'll sleep when Miguel's father arrives. Dakota studied her face, noting the dark circles under her eyes and the stubborn set of her jaw. You never stop, do you? Always fighting. Life hasn't given me much choice, she replied simply. No, he agreed. I suppose it hasn't. He moved toward the door, then turned back. There's a social at the church on Saturday. Thought you might like to go. Zara blinked in surprise. Are you asking me to accompany you? A slow smile spread across his face. Yes, madam, I believe I am. Before she could answer, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. The church social was the first time many in Durango Creek saw Zara as anything other than the lady doctor. In a blue dress with her dark hair arranged in soft curls, she looked every inch a Boston lady except for the fierce intelligence in her eyes that no amount of feminine attire could disguise. Dakota claimed her for the first dance. his hand warm against her waist as he guided her across the floor. "Everyone's staring," Zara murmured. "Let them," he replied. "They're just surprised to find I was right all along." "About what?" His eyes held hers. "That you're every inch a lady, Dr. Thompson." The evening progressed pleasantly until Mrs. Prescott, the banker's wife, loudly proclaimed that she found it most unseemly for unmarried women to parade their medical knowledge of men's bodies. A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned to Zara. "I've never paraded anything, Mrs. Prescott," Zara replied evenly. "I simply use the knowledge I have to help those in need." "Well, I find it indecent," the older woman sniffed. "No proper lady would choose such a profession." Dakota stepped forward, his face darkening, but Zara laid a restraining hand on his arm. "I respect your opinion, Mrs. Prescott," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "But I've found that propriety matters little to a mother whose child is dying or a miner crushed beneath fallen rock. In those moments, skill matters more than social convention." She turned to Dakota. "I think I'd like some air." Outside, under a canopy of stars, Zara tried to calm her racing heart. She'd known the acceptance she'd begun to feel was fragile, but the reminder still stung. "You handled that better than I would have," Dakota said, joining her on the church steps. "Years of practice," she replied with a small smile, "though I admit it never gets easier." Dakota leaned against the railing, studying her. "Why do you do it? Keep fighting when it would be easier to give up?" Zara considered the question. "Because people need help and I can provide it." "Because I made a promise to my father. And because every time someone like Mrs. Prescott tries to shame me, I remember the look on a mother's face when I save her child." "You're a remarkable woman, Zara Thompson," Dakota said softly. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in his tone made her look up. The admiration in his eyes caught her breath. "Most people don't see it that way," she managed. "Most people are blind," he replied, moving closer. "I'm not." For a moment it seemed he might kiss her, but the church door opened, spilling light and conversation into the night. The moment broken, Dakota offered his arm instead. "May I see you home, Dr. Thompson?" Late summer brought drought to the territory, turning the landscape brittle and dangerous. Wildfires sparked easily, and water became precious as wells and creeks ran low. Tensions in town rose with the temperature, tempers flaring over the smallest disagreements. When a fire broke out at the livery stable, the entire town mobilized to fight it before it could spread. Zara worked alongside everyone else, passing buckets and treating burns and smoke inhalation as they occurred. Dakota organized the ranch hands into a firefighting brigade, his voice cutting through the chaos with clear commands. Hours later, exhausted and soot-covered, they managed to contain the blaze to just the stable. As Zara bandaged a burn on a young boy's arm, she heard shouts from the direction of the saloon. Through the gathering crowd, she saw Dakota facing off against 3 men miners from the look of them, and heavily armed. "Your ranch has been damming the creek," one accused. "Our camp's been without water for 2 days." "The broken spoke doesn't dam water," Dakota replied evenly. "We're all suffering from the same drought." "Liar," another miner shouted. "Everyone knows you rich ranchers take what you want." The tension was palpable, hands hovering near weapons. Zara pushed through the crowd, positioning herself between the feuding parties. "Gentlemen," she said firmly, "fighting won't bring water, but I've treated miners from your camp, and I know there's an underground spring near your eastern claim. If you'd allow me, I could show your foreman where to dig." The miners exchanged glances, momentarily diverted from their anger. "You do that?" One asked suspiciously. "Why?" "Because people dying of thirst or gunshot wounds are equally my concern," she answered simply. The oldest miner studied her, then slowly nodded. "We'll take your help, Doc, but," he added, glaring at Dakota, "we're watching the creek." As the miners departed, Dakota caught Zara's arm. "That was dangerous," he said, his voice tight with concern. "Those men were looking for a fight." "Then it's fortunate I gave them an alternative," she replied. "Besides, the spring is real. I found it when treating a snakebite victim last month." Dakota shook his head in wonderment. "You continue to surprise me, Dr. Thompson." "Good," she said with a small smile. "I'd hate to become predictable." The next morning, Dakota arrived at her office with his right hand wrapped in a bloody cloth. What happened? Zara asked, immediately clearing her desk. Stupidity, he grimaced. Caught it on a nail while rebuilding the stable. Unwrapping the makeshift bandage, Zara revealed a deep gash across his palm. This needs stitches. Dakota nodded, not even flinching as she cleaned the wound. As she prepared her needle and thread, he watched her movements. You've got steady hands, he observed. Essential in my profession, she replied, beginning to stitch. Though I imagine it's important in yours as well. True enough, can't rope a steer with shaky hands. He paused, then added casually, speaking of my profession, I've been meaning to ask if you'd consider moving your practice to the Broken Spoke. We've got an old bunkhouse that could be converted. You'd have more space than here in town. Zara looked up, surprised. Are you offering me a permanent position at your ranch? I'm offering you a better situation, he clarified. The town's still mixed on having a female doctor. At the ranch, you'd have respect, better quarters, and steady pay. And I'd be conveniently removed from town, where my presence troubles so many, Zara added, her voice cooler. Tell me, Mr. Irwin, whose idea was this? The mayor's, the church ladies? Dakota's expression hardened. No one put me up to this, doctor. It was my idea for your benefit. My benefit? Zara tied off the last stitch with more force than necessary. I didn't come west to be hidden away on a ranch, treating only those deemed appropriate for me to see. That's not what isn't it? She interrupted. You've been my strongest supporter, and I'm grateful. But if you think the solution to the town's discomfort is removing me from sight rather than changing their minds, then you fundamentally misunderstand why I'm here. Dakota stood, his eyes flashing. I understand perfectly why you're here, doctor. You want to prove something to yourself, to Boston, to everyone who ever doubted you. But has it occurred to you that sometimes practical solutions matter more than principles? Zara wrapped his hand in clean bandages, her touch professional but cool. Principles are all some of us have, Mr. Irwin. I would have thought you understood that. They parted in strained silence, the easy camaraderie of recent weeks replaced by wounded pride on both sides. For the next fortnight, Dakota avoided town except when necessary, and Zara threw herself into her work with renewed determination. She rode out to the mining camp as promised, showing them where to dig for the spring, and spent long hours treating the inevitable injuries and illnesses that plagued a frontier town. The drought continued, and with it came disease. Wells turned stagnant, and typhoid spread through the poorer sections of town. Zara worked day and night, moving from house to house with medicines and clean water, teaching basic hygiene to prevent further spread. It was during this crisis that the town's attitude toward her began to truly change. When Mayor Thornton's youngest daughter fell ill, it was Zara he summoned immediately. When the schoolteacher collapsed during lessons, parents unhesitatingly brought their children to Zara for examination. Crisis had a way of stripping away pretense, and in the face of real need, the town discovered that a lady doctor was preferable to no doctor at all. One evening, as Zara trudged wearily back to her boarding house after treating a particularly difficult case, she found Dakota waiting on the porch. You look exhausted, he said simply. I am, she admitted, too tired for pretense. 5 new cases today, Dakota nodded. I heard, that's why I came. He held out a package, medicines. The Broken Spoke sent a rider to Tucson for supplies, thought you could use them. Zara accepted the package, emotion welling unexpectedly in her throat. Thank you, she managed. This will help tremendously. Dakota studied her face in the fading light. You need rest, Doc. You can't save everyone if you work yourself to death. I know, she sighed. But there's so much need, and I'm the only one, not anymore, he interrupted. I brought someone back from Tucson. A young doctor just arrived from back east. He's staying at the ranch tonight, but he's eager to meet you tomorrow. Zara stared at him in disbelief. You found another doctor. For the town, Dakota nodded. Figured you could use the help, and before you get that look in your eye, I didn't do it to replace you. Did it because one doctor, even one as stubborn and capable as you, isn't enough for this territory. Relief and gratitude washed over her. Dakota, I don't know what to say. Say you'll get some sleep, he replied gruffly, and that maybe we can put our disagreement behind us. Zara smiled, truly smiled for the first time in weeks. Consider it forgotten. The new doctor, Philip Harrison, proved to be a valuable ally. Young and idealistic, he harbored none of the prejudices against female physicians that Zara had come to expect. With 2 doctors available, the typhoid epidemic was contained more quickly, and Zara finally found time to breathe. It was during this respite that Dakota invited her to dinner at the Broken Spoke Ranch. Nothing fancy, he assured her, but the cook makes the best beef stew this side of the Mississippi. The ranch sprawled across a gentle slope, the main house modest but well-built, surrounded by bunkhouses, corrals, and outbuildings. As Dakota showed her around, Zara was struck by the ordered efficiency of the operation. "You've built something impressive here," she observed. "Not me alone," Dakota corrected. "My father started it 20 years ago. I just try not to ruin what he created." Over dinner, served on the wide porch to catch the evening breeze, Dakota shared more of his history. How his father had come west with nothing but determination, built the ranch from scratch, and died defending it during an Apache raid 10 years earlier. "I was barely 20, Dakota said, his gaze distant. "Found myself responsible for 20 men and 5,000 acres overnight." "That explains a lot," Zara mused. "You had to grow up quickly, take charge." Dakota nodded. "Made plenty of mistakes along the way, still do." He looked at her directly. "Like suggesting you move your practice here without understanding what that would mean to you." "You were trying to help," Zara acknowledged. "And I overreacted. The truth is, I've spent so long defending my right to practice medicine that I sometimes forget not everyone is questioning it." As twilight deepened into night, they moved to sit by the fire pit where the cowboys had gathered to swap stories. Zara listened, entranced by tales of cattle drives, outlaws, and frontier justice. She noticed how the men respected Dakota, not just as their boss, but as someone who worked alongside them. When the gathering broke up, Dakota walked Zara to the guest cabin where she would stay the night before returning to town. "Thank you for this evening," she said. "I can't remember the last time I simply enjoyed company without worrying about patience or judgments." Dakota smiled, the firelight catching the angles of his face. "You deserve more evenings like this. All work makes for a dull life. Is that what you think of me, that I'm dull?" Zara challenged playfully. "Zara Thompson, you are many things. Stubborn, brilliant, fearless, but dull has never crossed my mind." His voice dropped lower. "Quite the opposite." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Dakota stepped closer, his hand gently touching her cheek. "I've wanted to do this since the church social," he murmured, and then his lips were on hers, warm and certain. Zara found herself responding without hesitation, her hands moving to his shoulders as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Dakota rested his forehead against hers. "Been wanting to do that for a long time," he admitted. "I'm glad you finally did," Zara replied softly. Their newfound closeness blossomed over the following weeks. Dakota began spending more time in town, often bringing dinner to Zara's office or escorting her on rare days off for picnics by the creek. The townspeople watched with interest as the confirmed bachelor courted the lady doctor, and gradually, Zara found herself accepted not just as a physician, but as a woman with a place in the community. Not everyone approved, of course. Mrs. Prescott and her circle continued to sniff disapprovingly when Zara and Dakota were seen together. And some of the old-timers grumbled that Dakota Irwin had gone soft over a woman who wasn't even a proper lady. It was at the harvest dance in October that matters came to a head. Zara and Dakota were enjoying a reel when Jed Parsons, a notorious troublemaker who'd had too much whiskey, stumbled into their path. "Well, if it ain't the cowboy and his fancy woman," Parsons slurred. "Tell me, Irwin, does she charge you less since you're advertising for her?" The music screeched to a halt. Dakota's face darkened dangerously, his hand moving toward his gun. "Take it back," he said, his voice deadly quiet. Parsons sneered, swaying slightly. "Everyone knows what she is. No real lady practices medicine on men." She's just using it as cover for Dakota's punch landed before Parsons could finish, sending him sprawling into a table of refreshments. As Parsons struggled to his feet, reaching for his knife, Sheriff Taylor stepped between them. "That's enough, Parsons. You're drunk and disorderly. Time to sleep it off in my jail." "He hit me," Parsons protested, blood trickling from his split lip. "And every man here would have done the same," the sheriff replied, glancing around the room where several men were nodding grimly. "You insulted a lady. She's no lady," Parsons spat. "Ask anyone." The room fell silent. Then, to Zara's surprise, Mayor Thornton stepped forward. "They said she was no lady," he acknowledged, looking at Zara. "But when my wife and son were dying, she saved them both. When typhoid swept through town, she worked day and night without complaint." He turned to Parsons. "In my book, that makes her more of a lady than most." Murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Mrs. Thornton joined her husband, her young son in her arms. "Dr. Thompson is the finest lady I know," she stated firmly. "And anyone who says differently isn't welcome in my home." As Sheriff Taylor escorted the protesting Parsons out, Dakota moved to Zara's side, taking her hand. "You all right?" he asked softly. Zara nodded, too moved to speak. After years of fighting for acceptance, to hear the mayor and his wife, once her staunchest critics, defend her so publicly was overwhelming. Dakota squeezed her hand, understanding in his eyes. Then, to her astonishment, he turned to address the gathered townspeople. "While I have your attention," he said clearly, "I'd like to say something." He looked down at Zara, his expression softening. "From the first day Dr. Thompson arrived in Durango Creek, I knew she was special. She's the bravest, most dedicated person I've ever known. And if you'll all forgive a cowboy for speaking plainly," he dropped to one knee, still holding her hand, "I love her. Zara Thompson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Gasps and whispers rippled through the crowd, but Zara heard nothing beyond the pounding of her own heart. Dakota was looking up at her, vulnerability and hope plain in his eyes. "Are you certain?" she asked quietly. "Your life would be simpler with a conventional wife." Dakota smiled. "I don't want simple. I want you stubbornness, medical bag and all." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. "Then yes, Dakota Irwin. Yes, I will marry you." Cheers erupted as Dakota rose and kissed her, lifting her slightly off her feet in his enthusiasm. When they parted, laughing and a little embarrassed at the public display, they found themselves surrounded by well-wishers, even Mrs. Prescott offering grudging congratulations. Later, as they walked beneath a star-filled sky, Dakota explained his impulsive proposal. "I've been carrying that ring for weeks," he admitted, showing her the simple gold band with a small diamond. "Was planning something more romantic, but when Parsons started spouting off, I realized life's too unpredictable to wait for the perfect moment." "It was the perfect moment," Zara assured him, admiring the ring on her finger. "But are you truly ready for what marrying me means?" "I won't give up my practice." "I'd never ask you to," Dakota said firmly. "Your dedication to healing is part of why I love you." He drew her closer. "The broken spoke is big enough for both a ranching operation and a doctor's practice. We'll build you a proper clinic bigger than your office in town." "And children?" Zara asked softly. "Would you want them someday?" Dakota's eyes grew tender. "Very much. Little ones with your brains and my stubbornness would be quite something." "That's a terrifying combination," Zara laughed. "But yes, I'd like that too." They were married on Christmas Day, 1878, in the town's small church. Dr. Harrison stood as Zara's attendant while Dakota's foreman served as best man. The church overflowed with townspeople and ranch hands alike, all witnesses to the union of the lady doctor and the cowboy who had defended her from the beginning. Mayor Thornton hosted the reception at the town hall, and even Mrs. Prescott unbent enough to contribute her famous spice cake to the celebration. As Dakota and Zara danced their first dance as husband and wife, he whispered in her ear, "Remember when they said you were no lady?" Zara smiled up at him. "And you said I was your lady, that's enough." "I meant it then," Dakota said softly, "and I mean it even more now." Spring of 1879 brought new beginnings to Durango Creek. The Broken Spoke Ranch flourished under Dakota's management, and Zara's new clinic, built adjacent to the main house, quickly became a medical center for the entire region. Combining her Boston training with practical frontier medicine, Zara established a reputation that drew patients from as far away as Tucson. Their marriage proved to be a partnership in every sense. Dakota respected Zara's independence and professional obligations, while she came to appreciate the solid support he provided without trying to change her. They complemented each other. His practicality balanced her idealism, her compassion tempered his occasional hardness. In June, when Zara confirmed that she was expecting their first child, Dakota's joy was boundless. He immediately began planning an addition to their house and hovering protectively whenever Zara rode out to tend distant patients. "I'm pregnant, not incapacitated," she reminded him after he insisted on accompanying her to treat a ranch hand's broken arm. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my baby," Dakota replied stubbornly. "And not my wife," Zara softened, touching his cheek. "I promise to be careful, but I won't stop being a doctor just because I'm becoming a mother." As her pregnancy progressed, Zara did reluctantly agree to limit her practice to the clinic and nearby calls, with Dr. Harrison handling the more distant emergencies. Dakota expanded her clinic, adding a recovery room and better facilities, proud of how his wife had transformed medical care in the territory. The town that had once questioned whether a woman could be both a lady and a doctor now boasted about their famous Dr. Irwin to visitors. Children no longer feared the doctor's office, preferring Zara's gentle manner to the gruff Dr. Harrison, though they appreciated his skills as well. In February 1880, after a difficult but ultimately successful labor attended by both Dr. Harrison and the midwife from the Mexican settlement, Zara gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Jonathan and Elizabeth after their respective parents. Dakota, who had paced anxiously outside the birthing room for hours, wept unashamedly when Zara placed their son in his arms. "He has your eyes," he marveled, looking from the infant to his exhausted but radiant wife. "And she has your determination, coming into the world backward but insisting on arriving anyway. Like mother, like daughter," Zara laughed weakly, already doing things her own way. The twins thrived in the stimulating environment of the ranch. Zara adapted her practice to motherhood, seeing patients during set hours and employing a young Mexican woman, Consuela, to help with the children. Dakota proved to be a devoted father, often carrying a baby in one arm while conducting ranch business with the other. As the children grew, so did the broken spoke's prosperity. Dakota's innovative ranching methods and fair treatment of workers made the operation a model for the territory. Zara's clinic expanded to include a small hospital wing, where she trained several young women in nursing skills, gradually changing perceptions about women in medicine. In the fall of 1882, when the twins were 2.5, Dakota returned from a cattle drive to find Zara waiting with news. "Another baby," he repeated, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Are you certain?" "Quite certain," she confirmed. "Dr. Harrison confirmed it last week, due in spring." Dakota swept her into his arms, spinning her around. "You're remarkable, you know that. Running a clinic, mothering twins, and now creating another life." He set her down gently. "I fall more in love with you every day, Zara Irwin." The following spring brought them a second daughter, Rose, with Dakota's dark hair and Zara's determined chin. The family settled into a rhythm that balanced work and home, building a life rich with purpose and love. As the children grew, Zara made sure they understood the value of both their parents' work. Jonathan showed an early interest in medicine, following his mother on rounds from the time he could walk steadily. Elizabeth, strong-willed and adventurous, preferred accompanying Dakota, showing a natural affinity for horses and ranch operations. Rose, the peacemaker, moved comfortably between both worlds. By 1885, Durango Creek had grown into a prosperous town, with a railroad spur connecting it to Tucson. The original prejudices against female physicians had largely faded, due in no small part to Zara's quiet competence and Dakota's unwavering support. When a medical college in San Francisco invited Zara to give a lecture on frontier medicine, Dakota insisted she accept, caring for the children himself during her 2-week absence. "Your work matters," he told her simply. not just to our family but to all the women who will follow your path. Life wasn't without challenges. Drought, illness, and occasional conflict tested their resilience. When a range war threatened to erupt between cattle ranchers and incoming sheep farmers, Dakota and Zara worked together to negotiate boundaries and water rights, preventing bloodshed through diplomacy rather than violence. When Rose contracted scarlet fever at age 4, they feared losing her. For days, Zara rarely left her bedside, applying every medical treatment she knew while Dakota kept the other children distracted and the ranch running. Their partnership, forged in mutual respect, proved its strength during crisis. In 1890, as Arizona moved toward statehood, Dakota was appointed to the Territorial Council, adding political responsibilities to his already full life. Zara, now recognized throughout the territory for her medical achievements, was asked to establish training programs for frontier doctors. "We've come a long way from that first day," Dakota observed one evening as they sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Jonathan, now 10, was explaining something scientific to his sisters, gesturing enthusiastically. "When you claimed me as your lady to silence the gossips," Zara smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "Yes, we have. Best impulsive declaration I ever made," Dakota chuckled, his arm around her waist, "though I had no idea where it would lead." "To 3 children, a medical practice, and a successful ranch," Zara enumerated. "Not bad for a lady doctor and a stubborn cowboy." Dakota turned to face her, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart race after 12 years of marriage. "You know what amazes me most? That first day when you stepped off that stagecoach in your fancy Boston dress, you already knew exactly who you were. While the rest of us were stuck in our narrow thinking, you saw a bigger world. And you were brave enough to see it with me," Zara replied softly. As twilight settled over the Broken Spoke Ranch, the sound of their children's laughter mingled with the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of desert wind. Dakota and Zara Irwin sat hand in hand, partners in a life neither could have imagined when fate first brought them together in a dusty frontier town. They had proven that love could transcend convention, that a woman could be both a dedicated physician and a devoted mother, that a man could support a woman's ambitions without diminishing his own strength. Together, they had changed not just their own lives but the community around them, creating a legacy that would endure long after the old prejudices were forgotten. In the years that followed, their children would carry forward that legacy in their own ways. Jonathan would eventually study medicine in Boston, returning to expand his mother's clinic into a proper hospital serving the entire county. Elizabeth would combine her father's ranching knowledge with modern business methods, transforming the Broken Spoke into one of the territory's largest operations. Rose would become a teacher, educating generations of Arizona children with the same blend of compassion and determination she had learned from her parents. But all that lay in the future. On this quiet evening in 1890, Dakota and Zara simply savored the life they had built together, a life made possible because a cowboy had looked beyond convention to see the true worth of a woman who refused to be limited by others' expectations. "They said you were no lady," Dakota murmured, pressing a kiss to his wife's temple. Zara smiled, remembering how those words had once stung. Now they were simply part of their story, the beginning of a journey neither had anticipated but both had embraced wholeheartedly. "And you said I was your lady," she finished. "That was enough then." "It's still enough now," Dakota replied, drawing her closer as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "It always will be."